Before we dive into tonight's tale, make sure to hit that subscribe button if you want more creepy stories that will keep you up at night. Anna stood in the dim glow of her living room, her thin fingers fumbling with the last deadbolt on her front door. She twisted it hard, the metal grinding against the frame with a low clunk that echoed through her quiet house. She'd turned her place into a fortress over the years. 3 locks on the door, bars on the windows, even a chain she'd added after that weird summer a couple years back when the neighborhood felt off. She stepped back, wiping her sweaty palms on her paint-splattered jeans, her breath shaky. Anna wasn't the type to scare easy, but lately her hands hadn't stopped trembling. She was a loner, an artist with these deep, shadowed eyes that made people look twice, like she'd seen things she couldn't unsee. Her canvases lined the walls, dark swirls of color and jagged lines, like nightmares she'd trapped in paint. She shuffled over to the kitchen, her socks scuffing against the hardwood floor, and flicked on the kettle. The clock on the wall ticked past 3 a.m., another sleepless night. She rubbed her face, muttering to herself, "Come on, Anna, get it together." Her voice was rough, worn thin from too many nights like this. She grabbed a mug from the cabinet, the ceramic clinking softly as she set it down, when ping, her phone lit up on the counter. She froze, her heart doing that little jump it does when you're not expecting a sound. It was the doorbell cam. She tapped the screen, squinting at the grainy feed. The timestamp read 3:17 a.m., and there, in the thick fog curling around her porch, something swayed, a blurry shadow, tall and uneven, like a person but not quite. She blinked hard, leaning closer to the phone, and it was gone. Just fog and the faint outline of her mailbox. She let out a tight laugh, shaking her head. "Not again," she muttered, her voice barely above a whisper, like she didn't want whatever was out there to hear her. She set the phone down and turned back to the kettle, now hissing as steam puffed out. She poured the water, the splash loud in the silence, and tried to shake it off. Probably just a stray cat or the wind messing with the motion sensor again. She carried her tea to the living room, the mug warm against her cold fingers, and sank into the lumpy couch. The house creaked around her, old pipes groaning, the wind rattling a loose shutter outside. She sipped the tea, letting the steam curl up her nose when her phone buzzed again on the coffee table. She flinched, sloshing a little tea onto her lap. "Damn it," she hissed, wiping at the stain as she grabbed the phone. Another cam alert. Same timestamp, 3:17 a.m. She frowned. That couldn't be right. She just checked it a minute ago. This time, the feed showed something closer. A figure pressed right up against the camera, its face distorted through the wide-angle lens. Eyes way too big, like they were bulging out of its skull, and a mouth stretched into this jagged, uneven line. Anna's stomach flipped. She swiped the clip away, her thumb shaky, and deleted it fast, like that'd make it go away for real. She tossed the phone onto the cushion beside her and stood up, pacing toward the window. The curtains were drawn tight, but she peeked through a tiny gap, her breath fogging the glass. Nothing out there but the streetlight flickering through the fog. She stepped back, wrapping her arms around herself, when her phone buzzed again. She spun around, glaring at it like it betrayed her. The screen glowed with the same clip. She hadn't deleted it, or it'd come back somehow. She tapped play, her jaw tight, and watched as the figure's shadow stretched longer, reaching toward her window, like it knew she was there. Before she could process it, a sharp click snapped through the house. She whipped her head toward the door. The top lock had popped open. She rushed over, her bare feet slapping the floor, and slammed it back into place. Then the second one clicked open, followed by the chain rattling loose. "What the hell?" she gasped, her voice cracking as she wrestled each lock shut again. The smart home system was supposed to be top-notch. She'd paid extra for it after hearing about break-ins downtown, but now it was glitching like some cheap toy. She stumbled back, her heart pounding in her ears, when something scratched faintly at the base of the door. She froze, staring at the thin gap where the wood met the floor. A corner of something white slid through, a Polaroid, its edges curling like it'd been handled too much. Anna crouched down slow, her knees creaking, and picked it up with 2 fingers like it might bite her. The photo showed a woman's face, frozen mid-scream, her features melting into this waxy blur like a candle left too close to a flame. Anna's breath hitched. She flipped it over, nothing written on the back, just a faint smudge of red. She stood up fast, too fast, and the room spun a little as she clutched the picture. Her eyes darted to the easel in the corner, where her latest painting sat half-finished. She stepped closer, her shadow stretching across the floor, and squinted at the canvas. The figure she'd been working on, a woman with dark, swirling stitches across her face, matched the Polaroid. Same jagged lines, same waxy texture. But she hadn't painted today. She'd been too tired, hadn't even touched her brushes. Her hands shook as she held them up, catching a whiff of that sharp, oily scent of fresh paint clinging to her skin. She stumbled back, the Polaroid slipping from her fingers and fluttering to the floor, landing face up in the dim light. She didn't sleep that night. She sat on the couch, knees pulled up, staring at the door as the wind howled outside, louder now, like it was trying to claw its way in. The tea went cold in her mug, forgotten on the table, and every creak of the house made her flinch. She kept her phone close, the cam app open, waiting for the next ping. And deep down, she knew it'd come again. 3:17 a.m. wasn't done with her yet. Anna didn't move from the couch for hours, her knees still tucked up tight, eyes locked on the door like it might spring open on its own. The Polaroid lay on the floor where it'd fallen, that waxy, screaming face staring up at her in the faint glow of the streetlight sneaking through the curtains. The wind had died down outside, leaving the house too quiet, unnaturally quiet, like it was holding its breath. She finally uncurled herself, her joints popping as she stood, and shuffled over to the window. She tugged the curtain aside just enough to peek out, her fingers brushing the dusty fabric. The fog was thicker now, swallowing the porch, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her from out there. The next morning she dragged herself outside, the air cold and damp against her skin. She hadn't slept, her eyes were red-rimmed, her hair a tangled mess shoved under a hoodie. She stepped onto the porch, the boards creaking under her sneakers, and froze. There, right by the welcome mat, sat a wind-up toy monkey, its chipped paint and rusty symbols glinting in the gray light. She bent down, her breath puffing out in little clouds, and nudged it with her toe. The thing jolted to life, its tiny arms jerking up with a faint clang-clang that made her jump back. She muttered, "What the hell is this?" her voice scratchy from disuse. She crouched again, squinting at it. Its glass eyes were scratched, one half popped out, dangling by a spring. She scooped it up with a grimace, holding it away from her like it was contaminated, and tossed it into the trash bin by the steps. The lid slammed shut with a dull thud, and she wiped her hands on her jeans, glancing around the empty street. She didn't think much of it until the next day. She'd spent the morning hunched over her kitchen table, a mug of black coffee steaming beside her, trying to sketch something, anything, to shake off the jitters. The pencil scratched against the paper, rough lines forming a faceless figure, when she heard the porch creak again. She set the pencil down, slow and deliberate, and pushed herself up, the chair scraping against the floor. She cracked the door open, just an inch, and peeked out. There, tied with a red ribbon like some twisted gift, was a finger bone, yellowed, cracked, human. Her stomach lurched. She slammed the door shut, her hands fumbling with the locks again, and leaned against it, breathing hard. "This isn't happening," she whispered, pressing her forehead to the wood. She could still hear that monkey's symbols in her head, faint and mocking. That night, the cam pinged again. 3:17 a.m., right on the dot. She'd left her phone charging in the kitchen, its screen casting a blue glow across the counter. She stumbled in, rubbing her eyes, and tapped the alert. The feed was sharper this time, the shadows taking shape, tall, hunched figures swaying just beyond the porch light's reach. She gripped the counter, her knuckles whitening, as the screen flickered to static, then back to the empty fog. It kept happening, night after night, always at that exact time, like some sick ritual she couldn't stop. She started keeping a notebook by the couch, jotting down every detail, the shapes, the glitches, her handwriting getting sloppier as the days dragged on. Then came the knock. She was in the living room, flipping through her notes when it hit, 3 soft taps on the door. She dropped the pen, ink smudging across the page, and crept toward the peephole. Reyes stood there, a lanky figure in a worn leather jacket, their dark hair tucked under a beanie. Their eyes darted around, uneasy, like they didn't want to be there. Anna cracked the door, the chain still on, and glared out. "What do you want?" she snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. Reyes shifted their weight, hands shoved deep in their pockets. "Heard some noise last night," they said, their tone soft, almost too calm. "Just checking in. You're safe here, you know." Anna's jaw tightened. She hadn't seen Reyes in years, not since Lily disappeared, back when they'd all been tight. They drifted after that, Reyes pulling away without a word. She didn't trust that soft voice now, not one bit. "I'm fine," she said, and slammed the door, the bang ringing in her ears as she leaned against it, listening to Rhea's footsteps fade down the steps. She couldn't sit still after that. She grabbed her laptop from the coffee table, the screen's light harsh against her tired eyes, and started digging. She typed fast, fingers clacking on the keys, local news, missing persons, anything that might make sense of this mess. She found stories that hit too close. A barista gone missing 2 blocks over, a nurse vanished from her apartment across town. Both had weird cam glitches before they disappeared, flickering feeds, shadows nobody could explain. Anna scrolled, her coffee going cold, and stopped on a grainy photo of a doorstep with a wind-up toy left behind. Her breath caught. She shoved the laptop away, pacing the room, her socks sliding on the floor. Those relics, the monkey, the bone, they weren't random. They felt like pieces of something bigger, something she'd heard whispers about years ago. The cam buzzed again that night, cutting through the hum of the fridge. She snatched her phone, hands shaky, and watched as a tall, eyeless figure loomed on the feed, its head tilted like it was listening. The screen crackled to static, and she dropped the phone onto the counter with a clatter. She sank to the floor, back against the cabinets, and hugged her knees. A memory scratched at the edges of her mind. 10 years back, the night Lily went missing. Anna had been out of it, drunk or something. The details fuzzy like a half-erased sketch. She'd woken up to an empty house, Lily gone, and a blank spot where that night should have been. She pressed her palms to her temples, the faint sting of paint fumes tickling her nose when the cam buzzed again. A raspy whisper hissed through the speaker, low and deliberate, "You're next." She jolted, scrambling to her feet, and grabbed a knife from the block on the counter. The blade glinted in the dim light as she backed toward the living room, her breath ragged, the whisper still echoing in her ears. Anna stood in the kitchen, the knife still trembling in her grip, its blade catching the faint glow from the stove clock. She'd backed away from the counter, her socks slipping a little on the tile, her breath coming in short, uneven bursts. That whisper, "You're next," kept looping in her head, raspy and cold, like it had crawled out of the cam and into her skull. She set the knife down slow, the metal clinking against the countertop, and rubbed her hands over her face, trying to shake the fog in her brain. She stumbled back to the living room, her notebook still open on the couch, pages smudged with ink and coffee rings. She dropped onto the cushions, pulling the book onto her lap, and flipped through her scribbled notes. The times, the shadows, the relics. Her pencil tapped against the paper, a nervous little tick-tick-tick, as she started connecting dots. It wasn't random. Something was messing with her, hacking the cam, staging this slow drip of dread. She muttered to herself, doors unlocking, whispers, shadows, it's a pattern. Her voice was hoarse, cracking on the edges, but saying it out loud made it real. She grabbed her phone, swiping through the cam clips she hadn't deleted, pausing on the eyeless figure from last night. She leaned closer, squinting at the screen, her thumb hovering over the play button. The way it moved, deliberate and creeping, felt like a performance. Like this thing, this collector, was toying with her, building up to something big. She didn't hear the yard fill up that night. She'd crashed on the couch, the notebook slipping to the floor, her phone buzzing faintly beside her. When she woke up, the light outside was wrong, too dim, too gray, like the sun couldn't cut through. She shuffled to the window, her bare feet dragging, and yanked the curtains back. Her yard was a nightmare, dozens of mannequins scattered across the grass, their wax faces frozen mid-scream, mouths stretched wide, eyes hollowed out. She stumbled back, a gasp catching in her throat, and pressed a hand to the glass. They weren't just dumped there, they were posed. one reaching toward the house, another twisted backward, all of them gleaming with that waxy sheen, detailed down to the cracks in their lips. She whispered, "What the hell is this?" Her voice shaking as she fumbled for her phone to snap a picture, her hands too unsteady to keep it focused. The front door rattled then, 3 sharp knocks. She spun around, the phone slipping from her fingers and thudding onto the rug. She crept toward the peephole, her heart hammering, and saw Rise again, standing there in that same beat-up jacket, their shoulders hunched against the morning chill. She cracked the door, the chain rattling, and stared out. "What now?" she said, her tone biting. Rise glanced past her, their eyes flicking to the yard, then back. "This happened before," they said, voice low and careful, like they were stepping around broken glass. "Near Lily's place years ago. Same kind of weird shit." Anna's chest tightened, her fingers gripping the doorframe. "Why bring her up?" she snapped, her voice loud enough to echo in the quiet house. Reyes flinched but didn't answer, just shifted their weight, their boots scuffing the porch. Before she could slam the door again, the cam pinged on her phone, still lying on the rug. She lunged for it, nearly tripping over the coffee table, and tapped the screen. The feed flickered to life, her yard, those mannequins, but now a figure stood among them, tall and gaunt, slashing its own throat with a jagged blade. Paint poured from the wound, thick and red, pooling on the grass. Anna's breath stopped as the figure's face flickered. Her own face, pale and wide-eyed, staring back at her, then vanished into static. She dropped the phone, her hands flying to her mouth, and backed toward the wall, the plaster cool against her spine. She couldn't sit still after that. She grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer, its weight solid in her hand, and started rigging the house. She dragged a ladder from the closet, the metal scraping the floor, and climbed up to screw floodlights into the porch fixtures, her screwdriver slipping as she muttered, "He won't get me." She strung tripwires across the windows, fishing line tied to old bells she'd found in a junk drawer, little tink-tink sounds as she tested them. She worked fast, sweat beading on her forehead, her hoodie sticking to her back. She stepped back, wiping her hands on her jeans, and surveyed her handiwork, whispering again, "He won't get me," like a mantra to keep her sane. But the house didn't stay quiet. A rasp cut through the silence, leaking from the smart speaker on the mantel, a low, guttural, "You're my finale." Anna froze, the flashlight slipping in her grip, its beam jittering across the walls. She whipped around, scanning the room when Reyes burst through the door. She'd forgotten to lock it after they'd left. They grabbed her arm, their fingers digging in, eyes wide and wild. "This isn't new, Anna," they said, voice shaking. "I've seen this kind of fear before, back then with Lily. It's getting worse." Anna yanked her arm free, stumbling back, her elbow knocking a lamp off the table with a crash. "Get out!" she shouted, but Reyes didn't move, just pointed to the phone on the floor. The cam was streaming again, unprompted. She snatched it up, the screen cold against her palm, and watched her yard flicker into view. A tableau of mannequins, one standing out, black tar dripping slow and thick from its hollow eyes, staining the grass. Anna's breath hitched, her free hand clutching the flashlight tighter. She stepped toward the door, the bells jingling faintly as she brushed the wire and peered through the peephole. A shadow loomed there, gaunt and silent, just inches from the glass. She staggered back, the flashlight beam swinging wild, catching the edge of Rhea's pale face as they whispered, "It's here." Their voice barely audible over the pounding in her ears. Anna stood there, flashlight trembling in her hand, the beam slicing through the dim living room and landing on that gaunt shadow just beyond the door. The bells on her tripwires jingled faintly, a high-pitched tink-tink that cut through the thick silence. She held her breath, the air tasting stale and heavy, when the door burst open with a crack, wood splintering, hinges groaning. The figure loomed inside, tall and eyeless, its bony frame wrapped in a tattered coat. A syringe glinted in its hand, catching the light from her rigged floodlights, the needle sharp and dripping with something dark. Anna's heart slammed against her ribs. She lunged for the trap she'd set, a rope tied to a bucket of paint balanced on the shelf above the door. She yanked it hard, her arm jerking back, and the bucket tipped, splashing thick red paint across the figure's face with a wet splat. The floodlights blazed on, a harsh white glare filling the room. and the tripwires snapped taut. One caught the figure's ankle, sending it stumbling forward with a guttural grunt. Reyes shouted something. Anna didn't catch it over the blood roaring in her ears, and dove in, a pocket knife flashing in their hand. They slashed twice, quick and messy, the blade sinking into the figure's side. Dark blood pooled on the floor, spreading slow and sticky across the hardwood, the coppery smell hitting Anna like a punch. The figure hit its knees, then collapsed face down with a heavy thud, the syringe skittering across the room and rolling under the couch. Anna stood frozen, chest heaving, watching the paint drip from its head, mixing with the blood in a sickly swirl. It wasn't over. The figure twitched, its head tilting up, and rasped out, "They're watching!" the words wet and garbled, like it was choking on them. Then it went still, the room so quiet Anna could hear the faint hum of the fridge in the kitchen. She dropped the flashlight, its beam spinning wild across the walls, and grabbed a roll of duct tape from the coffee table. She knelt beside the body, her knees pressing into the cold floor, and wrapped the tape around its wrists, pulling tight until it squeaked. "Who?" she demanded, her voice sharp and ragged, leaning close to its paint-smeared face. "Who's watching?" No answer, just the drip of paint hitting the floor, steady like a leaking faucet. Ray stepped back, wiping their knife on their jeans, their hands shaking. "We got it," they muttered, more to themselves than her. Anna didn't look at them. She was staring at her phone, still propped on the mantel where the cam had been streaming. The screen flickered, and her stomach dropped. It wasn't her yard anymore. It was a dark website, grainy and cluttered, chat windows popping up fast. Bids rolled in. 30K for the kill. 50 gale for her eyes. Finish it live. Anna's breath caught, her fingers digging into the tape still in her hands. Reyes lunged for the phone, snatching it off the mantel, and pulled a pistol from their jacket. Small, scratched, like something they'd carried too long. They fired once, the bang deafening in the tight space, and the phone shattered, bits of glass and plastic raining onto the floor. Silence crashed in after, heavy and thick, broken only by the faint ringing in Anna's ears. She sat back on her heels, staring at the mess, the figure sprawled out, the blood, the paint. "What the hell was that?" she said, her voice barely above a whisper, her hands trembling as she pushed her hair back. Reyes didn't answer right away. They slid the gun back into their jacket, slow and deliberate, then crouched near the body. "Check its pockets," they said, their tone flat, like they were forcing calm. Anna hesitated, then leaned in, her fingers brushing the damp fabric of the figure's coat. She found a small USB drive tucked inside, cold and slick with paint. She held it up, the red smearing onto her fingertips, and stumbled to her laptop on the kitchen table, her socks slipping in the blood trail she hadn't noticed. She plugged it in, the screen flickering to life, and clicked the only file. Footage rolled, grainy, shaky, a woman tied to a chair, her mouth stitched shut with thick black thread, blood trickling down her chin. A blade flashed, and the screen went dark. Anna shoved the laptop away, her chair scraping loud against the tile, and pressed her hands to her mouth. Reyes stood behind her, their shadows stretching across the floor. "I knew him," they muttered, voice low and haunted. "Years ago, thought he'd stopped after." They cut off, shaking their head. Anna turned, glaring. "After what?" she snapped, but Reyes just stared at the floor, their jaw tight. She didn't push it. She stood, pacing back to the living room, her steps uneven, when the cam flickered back on, impossible, with the phone in pieces. She froze, watching the busted screen somehow stream again, showing her trap in reverse. Paint flowing upward, wires untangling, the figure rising like a puppet on strings. She blinked hard, her throat dry, and glanced at the floor. The body was gone, just a smear of blood and paint left behind. "Reyes," she croaked, pointing, but they were already at her side, their breath hitching. She stepped closer to the puddle, the light catching it just right, and saw her reflection staring back. Her face, but with faint stitches tracing her mouth, thin and dark, like they'd always been there. She touched her lips, her fingers cold, and whispered, "What's happening to me?" The question hung in the air, unanswered, as the floodlights buzzed faintly overhead, casting long shadows that didn't quite match the room. Anna stood over the puddle of paint and blood, her reflection still flickering in its glossy surface, those faint stitches tracing her mouth, mocking her. She wiped her lips hard with the back of her hand, like she could scrub them away, and spun toward Ray's. They were leaning against the wall, their jackets streaked with paint, staring at the floor like it held answers. Who was he? Anna's voice cut through the room, sharp and brittle, loud enough to bounce off the walls. She took a step closer, her sneakers squeaking on the hardwood, her hands balled into fists. You said you knew him. Who the hell was that thing? Rays didn't look up right away. They slid down the wall slow, their knees buckling, and sank to the floor with a soft thump. Their hands rested limp in their lap, the knife still clutched loose in one, its blade smeared dark. I thought it was someone I knew, they said, voice low and cracked, like it hurt to get the words out. A killer I couldn't stop back when things went bad, but it's not. They lifted their head, eyes haunted, red-rimmed, like they hadn't slept in years. They nodded toward the USB drive, still plugged into the laptop on the kitchen table. Watch it, they said, barely a whisper. You need to see. Anna's stomach twisted, but she couldn't stop herself. She crossed the room, her steps heavy, the floor creaking under her weight. The floodlights buzzed overhead, casting jagged shadows that danced across the walls. She dropped into the chair, its legs scraping the tile, and pulled the laptop closer, her fingers hovering over the keys. She clicked the file again, her breath shallow, and the footage rolled, grainy, shaky, the same clip from before, but now she let it play past the end. The woman in the chair was Lily, her sister, her dark hair tangled, her eyes wide and pleading. She was begging, her voice muffled through the stitches, pulling her mouth tight, blood dripping slow down her chin. Then the knife flashed, held by a hand Anna knew too well, her own steady and blank with rage, slashing fast. The screen went black. Anna staggered back, the chair tipping with a loud crash as she hit the floor. No, she gasped, scrambling away, her palms slipping on the tile. That's not me, that can't be me. Her voice broke, high and frantic, as she pressed herself against the cabinets, the cold metal digging into her back. She clutched her head, fingers tangling in her hair, pulling hard like she could rip the memory out. Rays didn't move, just watched her, their face pale and drawn. You killed her, Anna, they said, slow and deliberate, each word landing like a stone. 10 years ago, I found you after, covered in blood, out of your mind. I hid the body, couldn't turn you in. Her breath stopped. She stared at them, eyes wide, the room spinning around her. You're lying, she whispered, but it didn't sound convincing, even to her. Rays shook their head, their hands trembling as they set the knife down beside them with a soft clink. The relics, the monkey, the bone, you made them. The cam, the mannequins, all of it. You've been staging this, reliving that night over and over. They paused, swallowing hard. Those watchers on the feed? That was you too. You hacked it, set up the bids. Some twisted way to punish yourself. Anna's laugh came out sudden and raspy, echoing off the walls like a stranger's voice. She pushed herself up, her legs shaky, and stumbled toward the broken cam, or what was left of it, still sparking faintly on the mantel. She grabbed it, the jagged edges cutting into her palm, and stared into the lens, her reflection staring back. It shifted slow, her eyes hollowing out, stitches crawling across her face. Her true face, eyeless and silent, the one she'd buried deep. She dropped the cam, her hands shaking, and lurched toward the door, fumbling with the bell she'd rigged there. She rang it hard, the ding-ding-ding sharp and frantic, and the feed flickered on her laptop screen behind her, looping her own scream, raw, endless, tearing through the quiet. Rays stayed on the floor, their head in their hands, muttering, I failed you, so soft it barely reached her. Anna didn't hear it. She was gone, out the door, her bare feet hitting the porch boards with dull thuds. The fog swallowed her up, thick and cold, curling around the empty yard where the mannequins had been. The porch stood silent, the bell still swinging faintly, its echo fading into nothing. Inside, the laptop kept playing her scream, over and over, a digital ghost trapped in its own hell, while Reyes sat alone, the weight of 10 years pressing them into the floor. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more creepy stories. Stay safe, and see you in the next nightmare.